PTV, Telebisyon ng Bayan.
Strengthening and integrating ASEAN as a regional force, the Philippines as chair will spearhead efforts to solidify even more, as well as enhance the standing, goodwill, and credibility of ASEAN in the international community. As we pursue this goal, the Philippines will work closely with fellow ASEAN member states to ensure that ASEAN speaks with a unified voice in the international fora, especially on matters related to regional, political, and economic security. The Philippines will also ensure that the community will remain at the driver's seat of the East Asia Summit or any future configuration of the regional security architecture. The Philippines undoubtedly enjoys pride of place in steering ASEAN's engagement with external partners. These are sovereign states as well as regional and international organizations. Together, we will reinforce ASEAN's three pillars and present ASEAN as an exemplar regional organization which has impact not only with its immediate neighbors, but with the rest of the world. With ASEAN member states, the Philippines will observe milestone anniversaries of ASEAN's relations with Canada, the European Union, India, and the United States. Needless to say, these commemorative activities, aside from being celebratory, will strengthen even more ASEAN's relationships with these countries. Partnering for Change speaks of the power of forging and strengthening our alliance with our fellow ASEAN member states, our dialogue partners, and our stakeholders. Together, we will bring about positive changes in the lives of the peoples of ASEAN and will ensure that everyone benefits of peace, particularly in building and sustaining a stable and economic prosperous community. During its chairmanship of ASEAN, the Philippines will place a lot of energy in developing and advancing the development of micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises. These businesses actually comprise the large majority of business entities in the region. We will also spearhead regional efforts towards promoting regional peace and stability and maritime security and cooperation. We note the achievement of past ASEAN chairmanships, and we will build on the main achievements. The immediate past ASEAN chairman, the government of Lao PDR. And please note that in maritime security and cooperation, particularly in efforts to resolve disputes on the South China Sea, the Philippines will pick up where Lao PDR's chairmanship of ASEAN left off. We are referring to the joint commitment by ASEAN and China to fast-track discussions on the declaration of conduct of parties in the South China Sea or DOC, even as we complete a framework of the Code of Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea or COC by mid-2017. During our chairmanship of ASEAN, we will intensify efforts to ensure the completion of a framework of the COC within the first half of the year. We will also work with China and the rest of ASEAN to ensure the effective implementation of and compliance with the two confidence-building measures. But apart from ASEAN's past and ongoing efforts to promote regional peace and stability and maritime security and cooperation, the Philippines will also bring to the table a number of measures that the Duterte administration has successfully initiated or helped push forward, including the following. I personally consider the return of our Filipino fishermen to the Scarborough Shoal a victory of the rule of law. The Philippines is internationally known for its firm and constant advocacy of the rule of law. The return of our Filipino fishermen to the shoal proves the effectiveness of our pragmatic approach in dealing with China concerning this highly contentious issue. This approach had meant working on other aspects of our bilateral relations with China as confidence-building measures until such time that both sides are ready to tackle the South China Sea issue, hopefully with greater flexibility and openness in resolving the dispute. The two end results are: 1, the return of our Filipino fishermen to the Scarborough Shoal without the Philippines asking China to let them go back, and 2, the de-escalation or escalation of tension in the Scarborough Shoal area and the region as a whole. To address the unabated incidents of piracy and kidnapping for ransom, the border shared by the Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia, we have entered into a trilateral cooperation agreement with the latter two countries to protect our maritime borders. We believe that this trilateral security arrangement is a good model for the rest of the region as a means to preserve and promote regional peace and stability. A secure environment in the area covered by the agreement will doubtless also boost the revitalization of the BIMP Iaga, where Mindanao stands to benefit in no small measure. In mid-December last year, we participated in an informal meeting of the ASEAN foreign ministers that was convened by the Myanmar government to discuss the situation of the northern Rakhine state of Myanmar. During the meeting, we called for the extension of humanitarian assistance to the northern Rakhine state of Myanmar. We were careful to emphasize that this is done in a manner and at a time that is acceptable to the government of Myanmar. In doing so, we help promote respect for the core ASEAN principle of non-interference in domestic affairs. At the same time, we encourage continuation of ASEAN's time-honored practice of extending humanitarian assistance to one another in times of need. I wish to emphasize that our meeting in Myanmar scored another equally important breakthrough, which was to demonstrate to the rest of the world that ASEAN can take care of problems happening in its own backyard. After shepherding the discussions that led to the adoption of the ASEAN Convention on Trafficking in Persons, or ACTIP, in 2015, the Senior Officials Meeting on Transnational Crimes Philippines with the Philippine Center for Transnational Crimes, or PCTC, hosted several meetings in the last few months that successfully led to the adoption of a draft multi-sectoral work plan to implement the ACTIP and its accompanying plan of action. In cooperation with regional partners, the Philippines is also co-chairing capacity-building initiatives to address violent extremism in all its forms. The initiatives include workshops and high-level conferences on CVE. During our chairmanship, the Philippines will be proposing a Manila Declaration to combat the rise of radicalism and violent extremism as a reaffirmation of our leaders' commitment to combat this social menace. The Philippines, during its chairmanship of ASEAN, will pursue concentrated efforts in combating illicit drugs. As chair, we will be primarily guided by our leaders' reaffirmation at the 28th and 29th summit of their commitment to a zero-tolerance approach in realizing the vision of a drug-free ASEAN. We will also bring to the table our domestic successes in fighting this social menace to make the Philippines drug-free, with special emphasis on the rehabilitation of drug addicts. Corollary to our efforts geared towards achieving a drug-free ASEAN, the Philippines will work closely with fellow ASEAN member states in promoting and protecting human rights across the region. For this reason, since the Duterte administration came into office, the Philippine government has been working intensely through relevant ASEAN mechanisms to produce a regional agreement on the protection of the rights of all migrant workers before the end of the year. On anti-corruption and good governance, it is our hope that our relentless drive in the Philippines to stamp out corruption and instill discipline at all levels of government will convince others that stamping corruption in government can be done, and done successfully. I personally consider corruption to be as evil as the drug menace and violent extremism. With these initial achievements on top of ongoing efforts of ASEAN in all three pillars of the community, I believe the Philippines is well placed to make substantial contributions, if not lasting imprint, on ASEAN as we take on the ASEAN chairmanship for 2017. Friends in media, you are very much a part of our collective efforts and of our success as the Philippines takes center stage in the ASEAN theater. Set the momentum to achieve our common purposes and bring our achievements to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. The floor is now open to your questions. Please wait to be recognized. Once called, please identify yourself, give us your name and media affiliation. You may ask one main question and maximum of 2 follow-up questions. First question. Yes.
CNN Philippines. Sir, you mentioned that the Philippines will pick up where the Lao chairmanship left off when it comes to maritime security and cooperation. So, sir, does this mean that the Philippines will push for a mention of the arbitration ruling in whatever statement the ASEAN will come up with during our chairmanship?
The arbitral ruling of the PCA, Arbitral Tribunal, is something that's there. It is a final and binding decision to the parties. Whatever is said or discussed by anyone outside and third parties to the case will not change the decision. We have used the decision as the firm legal basis for us to pursue our claims and move forward when we are able to engage China in negotiating for the implementation of that ruling. Meanwhile, we are not going to raise this issue, or rather this matter or this decision with the Arbitral Tribunal, because there is really no useful benefit. We will, however, continue to be engaged in discussions about the disputes in the South China Sea. Any country can raise this. Now, if any country would like to pursue their respective claims against China with respect to any disputed territory in the South China Sea, they can do so and perhaps use the decision of the Arbitral Tribunal as a precedent-setting case in pursuing the matter. But for our purposes, just with respect to the arbitral tribunal, we feel no special purpose or special benefit to raise this. This is a matter that we will be raising with China at some future time on bilateral talks, and to do and involve others in this in the discussion of this decision will just simply be counterproductive for our purposes.
Thank you for that, Secretary. Another question is, you say that there will be, the ASEAN will aim to complete the Code of Conduct by mid-2017, sir. Is that correct? So my question is, who will be participating in coming up with this draft Code of Conduct? Particularly, will there be other countries that are not part of the ASEAN?
The declaration of conduct that was agreed upon unanimously by the ASEAN member states with China in 2002, as I understand, will be the basis for us to move forward in coming up with a code of conduct. The declaration of conduct was the preliminary stage towards coming up with a framework of the code of conduct, and this was done even before the filing of any arbitral tribunal case is concerned. So this has nothing to do with the arbitral tribunal decision. The code of conduct is just simply that framework of a code or conduct that will enable the parties to make sure that in the settlement of disputes, we follow all the legal and diplomatic processes accorded to us under international law, observing the rule of law, and at the same time ensuring that we will be resolving our disputes peacefully without further increasing or heightening the tension that will undermine the peace, stability, and prosperity of the region.
Last follow-up question from...
So sir, sino po yung gumagawa ng Code of Conduct? Is it now being drafted as we speak?
Even
sir?
as we speak, we continue to have discussions with our high officials below ministerial level, and these talks are ongoing, and this is precisely why we are hopeful that we would be able to come up with a code of conduct by mid-2017.
Next question from Jonah.
Just another clarification on what ASEAN will be signing by the middle of 2017. You said it will be, you want to complete a framework for the COC by mid-2017. That will be during the ASEAN ministerial meeting. So it will be an agreement among ASEAN members, sir?
The framework COC will probably, if we are able to complete this by mid-2017, will somehow be part of the report to our ASEAN meetings for the year. Maybe it can be reported in the summit, and it will be part of our documents and papers insofar as our achievement for that year. But the participants to these discussions, to the framing of the COC, are fixed. They're all members of the ASEAN regional group that has approved of this through the Declaration of Conduct, that has signed the Declaration of Conduct together with China in 2002.
But because I'm assuming that the directors general are drafting, or maybe some of your experts are drafting the COC, right? But it's the framework of the COC that will be submitted for noting by the ministers. It's
yes,
not the Code of Conduct itself, not the proposed Code of Conduct itself.
The framework Code of Conduct is the general agreement, and if there are necessary details that will have to be put there, then that can be a matter that will be discussed by the ASEAN members.
And then this framework, we still will not be, referring it to the Chinese, because in the past the problem has been that China is unwilling to...
No, China is very cooperative in coming up with this Code of Conduct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. China is very much interested in pursuing and completing this Code of Conduct. There is no dispute on that.
So ASEAN China.
Huh?
ASEAN China agreement.
Yes, this is a dialogue an agreement that was forged between the ASEAN member states and China. The Declaration of Conduct, and then towards the framing of the code of conduct for that matter.
Sir, sorry, last clarification. During the July meeting, the ministers of ASEAN will be meeting. There's a July meeting, right? The ministers meeting.
Yeah, but do not time it in that manner. Yeah, if it will happen in that, as I said, we are hopeful that it will be by mid 2017. If it will happen that way, yes, I would not discount the possibility that this will be part of the discussions first in the ASEAN ministerial level, and then maybe this can be confirmed and during the summit scheduled for November. But this will be simply between ASEAN and its dialogue partner, China.
So you will give ASEAN will be giving the Chinese foreign minister a copy of the framework for consideration.
They're part of the discussions now. China is part of the discussions now. We're sitting down with China in the formulating of this code of conduct, and there should be no misunderstanding on this one. They are part of the process, so it is not going to take China by surprise.
So when we approve it in the middle of the year, China will also be approving it.
Yeah, that is the process that we are hopeful will happen by mid 2017. Yes, pursuant to that declaration of conduct in 2002 with the ASEAN members and China.
Raul?
The declaration of conduct was signed between the ASEAN members unanimously and China.
Good afternoon, Raul Ancestors. Thanks. Can you enlighten us on what exactly this framework on the code of conduct will be? Is it as detailed as a discussion on how military drills in the South China Sea shall be conducted? Or will it be general in a way that all parties agree to continue working on a code of conduct?
I would not want to anticipate what will be discussed or what will not be discussed because the process is ongoing. Let that be a matter for the parties who are talking about it, talk about it or not talk about it, but the point is we will be arriving at a code of conduct at the end of the day.
A framework.
So, yes, Dario. May follow-up ka, Raul?
Yeah. Sorry. Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary. My name is Dario Agnote, Scene 1 News. Is it possible also to conclude the code of conduct itself, not just the frame, because you said that in mid-2017 we will be completing the framework of the COC. So is it also possible that within the chairmanship of the Philippines we would be able to conclude the COC itself? Thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I have the staff of the DFA that were here since 2002 on this matter. But the formulation of a code of conduct, you might call it as a framework code of conduct, or it can be even more detailed and exhaustive than just a mere framework. But this is the matter of formulating and what will be covered in this code of conduct is a matter that is precisely being discussed right now. And I would not want to preempt revealing what is being discussed because even I myself would not know about it at this point. The parties that are talking about it are talking about it. Now, what I'm saying is that we might term it as a framework code of conduct for now. At the end of the day, it can be the entire code of conduct. Don't be hung up on the idea that because we're using framework code of conduct that there will be two agreements. After the framework code of conduct, there will be another code of conduct. No. When the declaration of conduct was signed in 2002, the objective was to complete this with agreeing and formulating a code of conduct. And that is what we are trying to achieve, and I hope will be achieved by mid-2017.
Any other question? Yes, Cliff.
Good afternoon. My name is Cliff Benzon from Nikkei. The code of conduct or the framework code of conduct that we want to achieve by middle of this year, Will that be a legally binding document?
The code of conduct.
Yeah, and the one we were trying to achieve. Will that be a legally binding document?
I would imagine if that is agreed by all of the parties unanimously, because we act here unanimously. ASEAN acts unanimously. China agrees to it. I hate to think about anyone who has been a party and a signatory to this agreement not to be bound by it or to deviate from it. I do not know about what sanctions. They might have some provisions on sanctions, we do not know. But we'll leave it to that. Insofar as enforceability is concerned, if it is an agreement that is signed by everyone, I would again, this is a voluntary thing that everyone got into, then I'm sure that they will be bound by it.
Then just a follow-up question. The basis of this COC is a 2002 agreement, right?
DOC.
DOC.
Yeah.
And many things have changed since then. There are now at least seven islands in the South China Sea created by China. And last year there's a ruling. There's an arbitral ruling related to this issue on the South China Sea. How will these developments figure in the code of conduct that we want to achieve by middle of
Let's leave it to the parties to discuss that. They will discuss it.
Okay.
I don't want to anticipate or preempt.
Yes, Adina.
Sir, Dana but not GG Press. I just want to ask, it's January, so we expect that a code of conduct or a framework code of conduct will be finished by July. So how many meetings will there be? What percent are we into it? Because it was 2002 since it started. So what makes you so sure that it will be finished in 6 months?
I have never said that I'll be too sure. In fact, I said I'm hopeful and I'm confident with that hope that it will be done by 2017. But I agree with what the implications of what you've said. When we signed the Code of Conduct in 2002, there was a hiatus, and it is really only now that you have this revival of talks insofar as arriving at a Code of Conduct is concerned. There were intervening events that I am sure prevented the moving forward in this respect, but I'm very happy, and the past is the past. We are moving forward in this respect together with all the 10 ASEAN member states and China in making sure that we would be able to come up with a code of conduct, hopefully by mid-2017. So if you'll ask me whether I'm sure of it, no one can give you that kind of a guarantee, much less me. But we are hopeful, we are confident. Right now, the way I look at it is nobody seems to be hesitant or wavering in not arriving at a code of conduct. And this is part of what gives us the confidence and hope to say that we will be coming. I will not give you a definite date when on mid-2017 this will be accomplished. People have mentioned July. It could possibly be July. It could even be later. Again, there is always the possibility that something intervenes in the meantime and we will not be able to come up with a code of conduct along the way. But I think what we should be more focused on is the positive attitude, the spirit of cooperation, the willingness, so far as it is now, for us to formulate this code of conduct. And as long as we focus on this positive attitude, this enthusiasm to arrive at the code of conduct, I think we will be unstoppable in achieving our objectives.
Sir, follow up lang. Can you just give us an idea on how the document is being fleshed out? Are there meetings? Are there sit-down meetings being conducted? And at what level? Or is there a document that people are just passing through email or fax?
They're sitting down.
So how many
ministerial
meetings?
lab? I believe we have there are various working groups that have been created. I do recall at one time even our Undersecretary for Policy participated in one of these discussions, but it's a sit-down working group type of meetings,
So
not an exchange of just simply. Maybe after the sit down, there will be an exchange of documentations to see whether what has been discussed at that point in time had been accurately reflected in the government. Then there will be successive meetings again if it has not been completed, and so on and so forth. That's the process.
So when's the next scheduled meeting, sir? And how many are we looking until July?
Can anybody respond to that? My understanding before Helen is that it is a continuous process.
So we have 2 meetings for the first quarter. But I'm sorry, we're not in a position to unveil the dates and the country where it's going to take place.
There you are. And for a good reason.
The lady over there, second row.
Hello, sir. My name is Akiko Suzuki of the Asahi Shimbun. A basic question, but so why code of conduct has not been accomplished earlier, and why you are so confident in accomplishing it in your term or in the Philippines term? Is there any good talks with, for example, Mr. President Duterte with Chinese government, for example? Why? Is there any reason that there has been any obstacle to be removed under the Philippines chairmanship?
I was not yet Secretary of Foreign Affairs, but the way as I recalled, there were instances that somehow impacted on confidence of the parties in moving forward on these things, certain incidents and events, certain actions that were taken. But that's, as I've said, a matter of the past. What is more important now is we look at the determination and enthusiasm of the parties to move forward in coming up in the formulation of a code of conduct. And that is what I think we should focus on. As I told you, my reasons why I am hopeful personally. There might be some who may not be as hopeful as I am, but I'm giving you my personal view on the basis of my own personal assessment of how the talks are ongoing. I would say that right now, the conditions that exists that create that hope and confidence that we will be able to succeed in our efforts are certainly not the same as what had happened in the past that prevented the expeditious moving forward of the formulation of the code of conduct.
Okay, I'm calling next on Manny. Ai, would you like to ask? And then Alden.
Good afternoon. Sir, in the several past meetings of ASEAN, we have been asking for 2 things. One is the full implementation of the DOC, and one is to fast-track the approval or the conclusion of the COC. So with the signing, maybe, of a framework for COC in the middle of 2017, do we still need the full implementation of the DOC?
I think the DOC was the agreement of the parties to work towards the formulation of a COC.
Yes, but we are also asking for the full implementation of the DOC, especially the paragraph 5.
But the implementation of the DOC is precisely moving forward in so far as coming up.
We don't need that with this framework.
We're now way past the declaration of conduct. We're now going into this new level, a new phase, which is the formulation of a code of conduct as mandated under the DOC.
So, we don't need the DOC, the full implementation.
Oh yeah, once we have completed the COC, that's it. That will be the operating document under which all of the parties concerned will be proceeding in the general framework of how to resolve their disputes in the South China Sea.
So we're dropping the DOC.
Huh?
We're dropping that.
No, we're not dropping. Precisely, the COC now is the result of the DOC.
Evolution.
We're past that stage. Yeah. The implementation of the DOC is precisely moving forward in creating and formulating the COC. We are fully implementing the DOC by moving forward in so far as formulating the COC.
Sir, my last question. So, in your view, why do you think China has agreed to fast-track the COC now? Because in the past, I think in Cambodia, they said that they will agree to a COC when the right time comes. Is it the right time now?
There is a convergence of national interest, in my view, for everyone concerned to come up and formulate the COC. And we're very fortunate that we have gotten into that level. I would not be able to answer for China why, other than to say that perhaps they believe that it is also in their national interest to pursue this code of conduct. Likewise for us, it is in our national interest. But again, I'd like to make sure that all of you do not mistake the fact that the matter of the arbitral tribunal is something else. The ruling of the arbitral tribunal and our engagements with China in the future to implement that ruling is something else, separate and distinct from the code of conduct.
Ayi?
Hi, sir. Good afternoon. Ali Makarai from Agence France Presse. Sir, just to follow up, where do you think this positive attitude towards the conclusion of the COC is coming from? How much of a factor is President Duterte's efforts to seek warmer relations with China in these discussions?
I would say that indeed there has been a substantive influence on the approach and the fact of the Duterte administration in dealing with our disputes in the South China Sea as part of confidence-building measures that have also encouraged the China and the other member states of ASEAN to move forward on the COC. I had been speaking to a lot of the government representatives of the various ASEAN member states, particularly some of those who have disputes with China on the South China Sea. And they had always expressed confidence about what they feel seemed to be the correct tack that we have taken on this issue. And they are watching it very closely with the hope of trying also to follow suit. And this is in fact something that I would say as my basis that the efforts of President Duterte and in engaging China, setting aside our dispute where we cannot have ready solutions for it other than to force for the use of force, but rather to engage in the strengthening of the other aspects of our relationship as part of confidence-building measure also. And they have seen that for the Philippines right now, we are feeling many of the benefits of this kind of tack that we have approached. And they hopefully would like to see their own experience along that line patterned after what we're doing.
Thank you, sir. And sir, related question. Sir, just a related question. If the Philippines would indeed be successful in concluding the COC, what impact or consequences do you foresee? Do you see a lowering of the tensions in the dispute in the South China Sea? Would the COC include provisions on fishing, for example, like rules on fishing? Like, what kinds of consequences would we expect? As I said, I would not want to preempt the parties insofar as what they will be discussing about in the formulation of a code of conduct. But on general terms, it will be. I am sure that the code of conduct will cover a situation where and what to do with disputed areas. How do we proceed from there? At least that code of conduct will apply to matters not covered within our own territorial dispute with China, and so where the South China Sea is concerned, because that is already covered by the arbitral tribunal's decision. I do not discount the possibility also that the code of conduct might even also open the door for us speeding up our bilateral engagements with China insofar as the enforcement of the arbitral tribunal is concerned. But these are all possibilities for now. I'm not saying that this will happen. This may or may not happen. But the point is that if we are able to come up with a general a framework under which we could agree that, for instance, there will be no building of structures that will heighten the tensions, or
actions to be taken by the disputants that will be provocative. These are matters that I am sure will be covered under that code of conduct. Fishing rights, in the meantime that the territorial disputes will not be covered, can certainly be a matter included in the code of conduct. But again, you will see that there may be some other claimants whose claim as against China will be one of territorial ownership of the disputed area, much unlike ours, where the claim that we have with China is our exclusive economic zone. We are not asserting ownership of the zone, but we are simply asserting under the 1982 UNCLOS that we have the exclusive right to explore and exploit both living and non-living resources in that area. So, insofar as these other claimants are concerned, if that will be included in the code of conduct, then fine. It will be a very helpful provision or subject matter that will be within that framework.
Next, other questions? Charmaine, Ellen there, and then Ellen here.
Sir, just a follow-up to an earlier question. In the framework, which I believe will be just a set of elements and set of principles that will guide the details of the COC that will later on be drafted. Is it the position of the chair that there will be a reference to the arbitral ruling? And my second question is just to manage expectations. The COC will just manage the disputes. It will not solve it. So is it the position of, has it been agreed that in the framework or in the future COC, it will be pointed out that ultimately the resolution of the dispute over sovereignty will be settled bilaterally by concerned parties with China and not multilaterally?
In answer to the first aspect of your question, it is my understanding that it might not be a good idea to include in the code of conduct any reference to the arbitral tribunal's decision, because that is something that is presently disputed between the Philippines and China. China says that they're not going to sit down with us unless sitting down with them would mean that we will be discussing the dispute outside of the framework of the arbitral tribunal's decision. Conversely, we say we will only talk to you if you'll agree to talking to us within the framework of the decision. So that's precisely why I'm saying that might not be a good idea. And this is rightfully a matter that should really be the subject matter of engagements in bilateral talks with China, because we already have the arbitral tribunal's decision. Whether you include that in the code of conduct or make reference to that is not going to change the substance and the essence of the declaration. Now, insofar as other aspects of what might be included in the code of conduct, as I've said, we have our hopes about what will be included in there, but let's not get into a discussion about what we think should be there or should not be there, because let's leave the parties towards arriving at the code of conduct later on.
But sir, for just a follow-up, but as a maximum position of the chair, what do you want to be, what elements and what principles do you want to be included in the framework?
Well, you said something about managing the dispute. That's a good step forward. If the parties would be able to agree, not only managing the dispute, but somehow provide for the avenues and the mechanisms at which the dispute will be resolved, that's another significant step forward. But again, all of these are just conjectures. We hope would happen, and if it happens, let it be, and we certainly would welcome it. But let's not preempt the parties in making decisions on what to cover in the code of conduct. My understanding is, however, the parties have already decided on certain principles or certain agreements under the declaration of conduct on what and how to arrive at the code of conduct. They will have to follow that.
Yes, sir. Just a follow-up on that point. On the elements, sir, of the fleshing out of what constitutes self-restraint, as the Philippines, as the chair, what do you want the framework will refer to as the element of self-restraint, the fleshing out of the detail of self-restraint rule of the DOC?
The ASEAN, in its joint communique that was unanimously signed by all of the parties in the last ministerial conference in Laos, and I would imagine reaffirmed during the summit, was what do you call this? Had said that these disputes will have to be resolved within the context of the rule of law, within a rules-based order that we have established for the settlement of disputes, within the context of international law, particularly the 1982 UNCLOS. These are specifically provided in the joint statement. So I would imagine that that would be precisely, in essence, what would be the directions insofar as the substance. You cannot get into a code of conduct certain provisions that will run counter with international law. That will not be productive. That will be self-defeating for all of the parties concerned. It will have to be done within that framework. The important thing is that we do not, as you pointed out, engage ourselves in provocative action that would heighten the tension. Now, this is something that I'm sure the parties will be able to express themselves on if particular acts or conducts are being made in this regard. And let's cross the bridge when we're there.
But sir, as chair, will the Philippines call for a halt of militarization and reclamation in the South China Sea? As the chair and as an element of self-restraint to be embodied in the framework, are we going to call for a position that there will be a halt of reclamation and militarization?
That has been a particular area of concern expressed in the joint statement by the ASEAN member states. Yeah, and they said that these matters will only serve to heighten the tensions and destabilize the region. So very clearly, ASEAN will not allow that.
Yes,
Sure. Two of the contentious issues in the DOC are number 5 and number 6, which is the self-restraint and the definition of the use of force, right? Not the use of force. So in the self-restraint, it's tantamount to maintaining the status quo, right? That has been violated by China in the sense that they expanded the features that which they occupied, right? So in effect, the status quo was changed since 2002. So as chair in the direction, in the framework, what's going to happen? So now you are going to accept this new status quo?
You see, the status quo that, as you allege, has been altered, and there is a merit in what you're saying, have all been done even before the Duterte administration has set in. And there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, you cannot engage China in a war because of that and tell them to undo what they've done, which very clearly they will not do. What will you do in that event? Fight China? But then again, we're very fortunate that you have the arbitral tribunal that insofar as in our disputed territory concerned, there are some areas that are covered in that particular concern of reclamation, changing the status quo, and the arbitral tribunal have made specific rulings along that line and said that no, that has no legal basis at all. And this is where we hope that in the future, in implementing the decision of the arbitral tribunal, we can move from.
So
now, you cannot, however, impose upon China now, telling them you change the status quo, where the status quo was altered even before the president, the present administration assumed office.
So is that the sense that the Philippines, as chair, is going to lead the framing of the making of the framework of the COC? The ones that what you're telling us now, like let's just accept the present situation as that's where we will go from, we'll take off.
You see, insofar as, for instance, mischief reef is concerned, which is that area, particularly part of the disputed area between China and the Philippines are concerned, where perhaps your concern can be most applicable. We have prevented that insofar as Scarborough Shoal is concerned. So we're just specifically talking this particular instance with Mischief Reef. There's nothing we can do about altering that status quo. But insofar as the arbitral tribunal's decision is concerned, they have touched on that. And they say that the damage, the reclamation activities, the conversion of the rocks and other features into islands has no basis at all. It is a violation of the 1982 UNCLOS. We have that firmly established, and we will move firmly on that basis in the future when we engage China in the discussions. Now, there are other areas that is not covered within our disputed territory with China, but might be an area that will affect the claim between Vietnam, for instance, and China is concerned. Now, that's a matter that they'll have to pursue with China. Now, of course, as I've said, the Code of Conduct might cover prospective applications and maybe even come up with corrective measures that have been done in the past. But again, I'm not going to say that it will happen. I would hope it would. But this is something that if China, if Vietnam would like to bring into the fore in our discussions in ASEAN, they're free to do that. They can do this in their interventions, but insofar as putting that as part of the agenda is concerned, that will have to be decided by consensus of all of the ASEAN members. But there is nothing that will prevent any particular ASEAN member state to include anything that they want to in their dispute in the South China Sea by way of interventions in our meetings in the 2017 ASEAN that we would chair.
The last question will be asked by Ellen.
Last question. So I will move to Abe, to Prime Minister Abe. Yes, sir. So Prime Minister Abe is coming tomorrow and on the 13th. So what will be the main agenda? President Duterte had just came from Japan in October, but then a few months after that, Prime Minister Abe is here. So what is it that they still have to affirm or to talk about? What's the main agenda of the visit here?
Well, there will be memorandum of agreements that will be signed again when the President and the Prime Minister, when the Prime Minister will be arriving. At this time, I can say with definiteness it will be on January 12 and 13. January 12, he will arrive at 1:55 in the afternoon, and that's tomorrow. And then in the evening at 9 o'clock, he'll be flying to Davao because there will be a continuation of bilateral engagements in Davao. So right now, the various agencies of government are reviewing the memorandum of agreement that will be signed during the time, and hopefully that will be signed and witnessed by the President and Prime Minister Abe.
So what are these memorandum of agreements?
Excuse me?
What are these memorandum of agreements? Particularly on what topics and
yes,
subjects?
well, you have in the area of transportation, as I understand, you have maybe ASEC Paredes can give you. Yeah, these are on the works, and this is what we expect.
Hello. Interagency coordination is ongoing. We hope that these will be concluded in time for the visit. But essentially, it's on agriculture cooperation, financing of agri-related MSEs, that's one. Also on security cooperation, enhancing the security cooperation, and infrastructure cooperation. Essentially, it's enhancement of ties between Japan and Philippines, and whatever we deem fit to receive from Japan, then that is our goal for the visit of the Prime Minister.
Yeah, we will be also making our press releases and conferences after the bilaterals that will be taken, so we can keep you abreast of what are being discussed and what would eventually be signed. Suffice it to say that this visit of Prime Minister Abe is the result of the invitation that was extended by the President to the Prime Minister as a reciprocal arrangement that was done with a very warm welcome that the President received when we were in Japan as well. And this particular trip, as I understand it, Prime Minister Abe will also be accompanied by a delegation of businessmen from Japan, and this will again augur well for whatever prospects of further investments that will be made by these businessmen here. You are familiar about the assistance that Japan has given insofar as trying to provide agricultural assistance in the areas covered by the Bangsamoro. We have also been already received 2 fast crafts insofar as enabling us to patrol our territory in the southern waters of the Philippines and so on, and there would be other vessels that would be forthcoming. So these are the things that we would like to do. At the end of the day, we are very confident and positive that these are all aimed at even strengthening further our relationship with Japan. Japan is one of our strongest friends and and partners in this part of the world, and we value that friendship. If I might be, I guess I'm at liberty to even mention to you here, this has already come out in the press release. Unprecedentedly, he will be the first head of state to visit Davao. Yeah. And we are looking at the possibility that maybe even perhaps they will have breakfast at the President's house in Davao, just to dramatize to you how we value this friendship we have with Japan. And we will continue to nurture it and to treasure it for our mutual benefit. Excuse me? Oh yes, yeah. This has been always ongoing. Yeah. Our desire to Japan has been ready in giving us assistance to enhance our capacity also in fighting illegal drugs. And I understand that there is a possibility that they will be giving assistance insofar as providing for the construction of building of rehabilitation centers, drug rehabilitation centers. And this is something that we're looking forward to.
What about China, sir?
Excuse me?
What about China? State visit to the Philippines this year?
How's that?
President Xi Jinping.
China.
Xi Jinping.
Coming to Manila.
Scheduled visit to the Philippines, state visit to the Philippines. And
He will definitely be coming in November. I do not know. He has not made any. There is a pending invitation.
The ASEAN is usually attended by the premier, not
the summit that will be happening in April is a summit of the ASEAN members. China is not a member of ASEAN.
Even East Asia summits, sir, only the premier goes there. So we were wondering whether there's going to be a separate state visit by the Chinese president himself.
The president had extended the invitation. If Xi Jinping will respond by saying that he would be happy to come here before the summit, we certainly would welcome him.
What about, sir, the vice ministerial consultation between the Philippines and China? I believe it's going to resume. Is it happening soon, like January? And what is on the table?
What is this?
The vice ministerial political consultation, bilateral, China and Philippines.
That is ongoing. Yeah, senior officials level. Yeah.
When has that started? I mean, sir, because that has been suspended when the Scarborough Shoal incident happened. So when has that officially resumed? Has it started? And where was it? It's supposed to be alternating venues in Beijing and Manila. So has it happened already?
Strengthening a political. The political aspect of the
bilateral consultation.
Yes, of course, the consultations is happening. Yeah, as I recall, our Undersecretary for Policy has arrived from from a trip to China precisely for this purpose.
When was that, sir?
Not too long, a few weeks ago. Yeah. Yeah.
If there are no other
We are
questions.
very quietly pursuing this matter. We don't want, what is being discussed insofar as these consultations are concerned are being done quietly to make sure that we will steer clear of any controversy that the press might try to introduce or bring into the fold or bring into the factor in. And this is something that we're very sensitive about. The delicateness of our discussions is something that we value so much. And until and unless we're able to be confident about the success of what we're doing, we would be happy. We have taken a lot of other actions and steps, proceeding on a lot of engagements that we cannot even discuss with you right now because these are of sensitive nature. But rest assured that whatever action we are doing, these are all done precisely for the purpose of upholding the national interests and carrying out our independent foreign policy.
So more hands are being raised. Are you open to answering more questions?
Ali.
Okay. Ali, Ellen, and who else? Manny and Alan.
Sir, on another topic, Defense Secretary De Lorenzana said that he plans to visit our military outposts in the West Philippine Sea. Has he discussed this with you, and do you think such a visit would conflict with our policy of trying to improve our relations with China, would possibly anger Beijing?
Our outposts are there, like in Pag-asa.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, what's wrong with going there? Unless you are scared that it might provoke China, so let us withdraw it. No. It's there.
Has he
And we
discussed
are,
previously?
if as Secretary of National Defense, he feels that it is necessary for him to do so, to boost the morale of our people who are there, by all means, he can do that. I don't believe that will be provocative.
Has he discussed details with you, sir, of when, which particular areas he will visit?
No, I have not discussed details with him, but I was with him this morning, and he was telling me, I was raising with him the possibility of whether or not in the near future he would be able to welcome the press visiting Pag-asa and so on. And he has indicated that this is a strong possibility, and he will make some announcement along that line. But then again, this is a matter you'll have to deal with Secretary Lorenzana for. But what I understand is that there is no policy that will prevent that.
Thank you.
Sir, along that line. Since the filing of the arbitration in 2013, we have a moratorium on the oil exploration in the Reed Bank and on the development of our facilities in Pag-asa. Have we lifted that moratorium?
How?
Have we lifted? Lifted.
Lifting it?
Yeah.
If you did that, and that's part of the disputed territory, that would be a provocative act. China has precisely taken action to stop some of our exploratory initiatives there before. But then again, this is a matter that can be discussed between China and the Philippines without undermining our respective claims. As you can see, we may want, for instance, to explore the area, and we may want even to start mining in the area, both especially the non-living resources that are there. But we certainly will need a lot of technical assistance and support for this purpose, because we are not capable of doing so as yet. This is a matter that can always be a possibility in engaging other countries in the possibility of negotiating for this without undermining our respective claims.
Sir, I just want to clarify. Is it a no? We have not lifted? Because I think the President has said that he is open to a joint exploration in Reed Bank.
Joint exploration. Yeah, he said that he is open,
Yeah,
but he did not say that it is now open.
With China?
Yeah. He said he's open to joint exploration, not only with China, with anyone else who would like to do that. But he has, I'm sure it will be in the national interest for us to open this possibility, but whether or not we can do it, let's see. Let's try to resolve whatever obstacles that may come along the way. But do not misunderstand the President's statement by saying that while he is open to do so, that it is now open, because it is not yet.
Yes, sir.
Secretary, Cliff Benson again from UK. The new President of the United States is perceived to be less passionate about Asia. And although we have, previously aired our sentiments or some complaints about the U.S., we've been a beneficiary of the pivot to Asia policy of President Obama. So with this kind of new president, Donald Trump, who is more inward rather than outward looking, how are we preparing for that kind of attitude towards it? How is the Philippines?
I think the matter of America's pivot to Asia and whether or not President-elect Trump will pursue the same policy or will stop that policy when he assumes office is certainly a matter pertaining to the domestic affairs of the United States, if that's what they want to do. I do not believe that it will have an impact on us, on the security of our region. We do not have any enemies in the region. I know that America has some national interest to protect, even in this part of the world. That's probably why they had initiated this pivot to Asia to begin with. But that's for them to evaluate whether, in fact, it will be in pursuit of their national interest is concerned. I know that because, for instance, the South China Sea includes the sea lane where about 65% of the world trade passes through, that America has a national interest to protect insofar as the freedom of navigation is concerned. They can do this on their own as a member of the international community. After all, insofar as the international community is concerned, regardless of the countervailing claims of those involved in territorial disputes, this remain to be international waters, and this is certainly open to international navigation for that in that respect. So, if it is in the national interest of America to continue doing so, then fine. Let them do it. That's their decision and that's their concern.
Last three questions: Ellen, GT, and then Alan.
Sir, the ABE visit, some observers looking at it as preventing the Duterte administration from its perceived pivot to China. How do you think of it? The ABE visit, some observers believe that it's a measure to prevent the perceived Duterte administration's pivot to China.
There is I'm sorry, I didn't get the...
Sir, the Philippines' closer relation with China, and then the ABE visit is being looked at by some observers or analysts as a countermeasure to prevent a much closer relation with China.
How is that so?
How is that so?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. If they're the ones that say that, then let them explain it. Insofar as we're concerned, we are implementing what our Constitution says. We maintain friendship with everybody, amity amongst all nations, and in so doing, our only primordial concern is our national interests, carrying on an independent foreign policy in that regard. So I do not know why. What is the basis for others to say that the visit of President Abe is a countermeasure against the initiatives that we're making towards China?
Last two questions.
I was at the Vandeneur this morning in Malacanang, and I saw China, the Chinese ambassador and the Japanese ambassador. We had our pictures taken together, and we all were very happy about the fact that we have these kinds of engagements with each other in promoting friendship amongst everybody.
Was the Russian ambassador also there?
Yes, he was there. I also had a picture taken with him.
Wow.
Together with Yes, there were other diplomats with us in that picture.
How about the Indian?
Huh?
The Indian.
Asian. ASEAN.
India.
Oh, there was a charge from India. We have not yet. They have not yet. They have an ambassador designate, but has not yet presented his credentials, and then there's still an agreement to be awaited. But I had a picture with him too. Oh yeah. In fact, he was one of the firsts. Yeah. And I told him about the policy of the president that was to the effect that we are going to enforce very strictly against anybody engaged in these 5-6 activities, especially exploiting and taking advantage of our poor people engaging in business, especially in the local marketplace, the wet markets for that matter. And I assured him that this was not being done with reference to any particular ethnic group or any particular nationality, although he understood that there are many Indians who are engaged in this kind of activities. But that's purely incidental. What we would like to do is to precisely curtail this activity, regulate it to a certain extent, so that it will be mutually beneficial for everybody. And this is the purpose of the exercise that we're going through. And it is not directed as anything prejudicial to anybody.
So yes, no comment.
Huh?
Yes, no reaction.
Oh, we ended up our conversation by saying that this would be a matter that we will certainly be discussing with the ambassador. But I do not think that we will have any problem along these lines, because they fully understand that this is something that we must address as part of the domestic problems that we have to address to make sure that all our people are protected against any unscrupulous activity.
Last two questions, GP and then Alan.
Good afternoon, Secretary Yasay. Sir, leaving India for a while, Sir, good afternoon, Secretary. Leaving India for a while. Sir, has U.S. President-elect Donald Trump responded to President Duterte's invitation to attend the ASEAN? Has he responded already?
I do not know whether you will consider that as a response, because he has not yet assumed office. Yeah, I would imagine that let's wait for the pleasantries that they might have exchanged during that phone conversation that they had was something very informal, principally a greeting, congratulating the other for his election and so on. And the invitation was merely as a courtesy. But if there has to be any invitation that will have to be responded to, it will have to be done on an official basis. But since President Trump has not yet assumed office, then I guess it is quite understandable if Mr. Trump did not respond to it positively. Although I am not sure whether he said no. On the contrary, I have reasons to believe that he might have said yes. But these are all unofficial, and don't bet your life on it that it will happen simply because of that.
Yes, sir. Sir, just briefly shift to another topic. Vice President Lene Robredo, in a statement, said that her office received an invitation for her to attend the Bandingur, but it was cancelled by the Office of the President. Sir, may I just ask your reaction from as Secretary of Foreign Affairs? Would that create some sort of an impression to our diplomatic that our political that there's a not so harmonious political relations within the premise of that? So your reaction, sir?
Unfortunately, I cannot react to that because I haven't heard of that statement to begin with, and I don't want to react on something that I have not heard. I cannot verify. Insofar as I understand, this what do you call this? Bandingur this morning was an event that is planned, decided upon, initiated, managed by the palace. The DFA had nothing to do with it, other than the fact that the persons who are traditionally invited to this affair are people coming from the diplomatic community, or rather representatives of foreign governments assigned here, foreign organizations assigned to the Philippines, and that's the purpose. The President also extended invitation to the members of his cabinet, and so I'm not too sure what is the basis for anyone to say that the Vice President made this kind of a comment about being cancelled. I cannot make any comment on that at all.
Last question, Alan.
Okay. Sir, good afternoon. I'm Alan from DWIC. Sir. Okay. Hi, sir. So, sir, there's another topic. No, in your Facebook account, you mentioned that a person who is involved to oust President Duterte is considered a traitor. Can you give us, or can you elaborate that, or can you give us more details about that?
No, that's a general truism that I said, without any particular reference to any particular individual who might feel guilty about what I said. All I said was that, in my view, anybody who tries to oust or is part of a plot to oust a duly elected president cannot be considered as a hero or a patriot, but rather is a traitor. And I even said that if you are part of the efforts to remove or oust forcibly a duly elected president, one way or the other, herein lies the core difference between one who is a Filipino and one who is not. And this is exactly what I said. And I continue to say that without any particular reference to any particular individual.
Thank you very much. On this note, we would like to conclude our press conference. Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, and thank you to all the members of the media.
Thank you.